The firelight snapped and hissed as Jerome's back pressed against the cold wood of the cabin door. His breath came in shallow bursts, each one sharp in the icy night air that seeped through the cracks. Outside, the storm howled like a living thing, swallowing the sound of his pounding heart. He could still hear them, muffled laughter echoing down the hallway, smooth, deliberate, like a pack of wolves circling a wounded animal. This was supposed to be a simple corporate retreat. A weekend of bonding with the executives who controlled his future at Hawthorne Capital. But now, standing alone in the dark with no signal and no escape, Jerome knew every polished smile had been a mask. It had started with a toast at dinner hours earlier. A mahogany table stretched beneath glittering chandeliers, expensive wine glasses flashing like tiny weapons in the candlelight. Jerome, the lone black analyst among a dozen senior executives, forced a polite smile as they raised their glasses. The CEO, a silver-haired charmer named Richard Hawthorne, leaned forward with a grin that never touched his icy blue eyes. "To diversity," Richard said, voice smooth as aged bourbon. "It's good to have perspective at the table." The laughter that followed was too loud, too rehearsed. The jokes grew sharper with each glass of wine. Subtle jabs at urban grit. Sly comments about working twice as hard. At first, Jerome told himself it was nerves, that these men were simply out of touch. But then came the questions about his upbringing, about how a guy like you made it here. Questions dressed as curiosity but dripping with something far darker. When the storm knocked out the cell service, Richard clapped Jerome on the back and said, "No distractions now, just us." The words landed like a warning. Jerome excused himself after dinner, claiming fatigue. He needed air, needed to think. But as he stepped into the hallway, he noticed the lodge staff were gone. Their cheerful chatter had vanished, leaving only the echo of his own footsteps. The front door, which had stood wide open earlier, was now locked. That's when he heard the first whisper. "Smart kid. But does he belong?" It came from the dining room, low and cutting, followed by a chorus of murmurs and a sharp laugh that turned Jerome's blood cold. Now, crouched in the dark near the storage room, Jerome's mind raced. He remembered the subtle way Richard's assistant had guided him toward the guest wing, the glances exchanged when Jerome refused another drink. He thought of the old mountain road they'd driven to get here, miles of twisting asphalt now buried beneath ice and fallen trees. A sudden creak broke the silence. Footsteps, slow, measured, coming closer. Jerome pressed himself flatter against the door, every muscle coiled tight. A shadow stretched across the hallway as Richard's tall frame emerged from the flickering firelight. "Jerome," Richard called softly, his tone almost fatherly. "Come back to the fire. You're missing the best part of the night." Jerome didn't move. Richard stepped closer, the faint glint of a key ring dangling from his hand. "You're a smart man. We value that. But smart men know when to stay in their lane. Promotions, bonuses, access, these things come to those who play the game." His voice hardened. "And those who don't, well, they find themselves out in the cold." Lightning flashed outside, illuminating Richard's face, calm, confident, dangerous. In that instant, Jerome understood. This retreat wasn't about bonding. It was an initiation, a test of obedience wrapped in luxury. His story, his career, maybe even his life would end here if he showed fear. He scanned the hallway for an opening. Behind Richard, a side door to the supply shed stood slightly ajar, the wind rattling it against its frame. Jerome's eyes darted to a heavy iron poker leaning against the wall beside the fireplace. "Don't do anything foolish," Richard said, noticing the glance. "You're talented. We can make you very comfortable. But only if you understand your place." A low rumble of laughter rose from the dining room. More footsteps followed, 2, maybe 3 men. Jerome's pulse quickened. Then came the sound of a window shattering at the far end of the lodge. Everyone froze. For a split second, the storm roared louder than their breathing. Jerome seized the moment. He lunged for the poker, swinging it hard against the hallway light switch, plunging the space into total darkness. Richard cursed as glass crunched under his shoes. Jerome bolted toward the supply door, heart hammering. Cold night air slapped his face as he burst outside into the blizzard. Snow stung his eyes, but he didn't stop. He sprinted toward the tree line, the echo of shouting executives fading behind him. Branches clawed at his coat. The mountain path was treacherous, half buried in drifts, but he forced his legs to keep moving. Minutes or hours later, a faint glow appeared through the trees. The caretaker's cabin. He stumbled toward it, nearly collapsing as a figure stepped into the doorway. An elderly woman, wrapped in a heavy parka, held a satellite phone in one hand and a rifle in the other. "Help!" Jerome gasped. I know," she interrupted, eyes sharp. "I heard everything over the security feed. Get inside. I've already called the sheriff." Relief flooded through him, but fear lingered. He glanced back at the dark outline of the lodge, where shadows flickered behind frosted windows. Richard and his men were still inside, waiting, their polished smiles hiding a predator's patience. By the time law enforcement arrived hours later, the storm had eased to a bitter drizzle. The executives claimed it was all a misunderstanding, a team-building exercise gone wrong. But Jerome saw the way their eyes narrowed when the deputies led them out. He gave his statement carefully, leaving nothing unsaid. He knew they would try to bury the incident, to spin the night into something harmless. But he also knew their power ended with exposure, and he had every word recorded on the caretaker's security system. As dawn broke over the snow-covered mountains, Jerome stood at the cabin window, watching the retreat vehicles disappear down the winding road. His career at Hawthorne Capital might be over, but the truth was his weapon now. They had tried to isolate him, to break him with fear and subtle threats. Instead, they had given him a story no investor could ignore. The storm was over, but the fight was just beginning. Jerome took the satellite phone from the caretaker, dialing a trusted journalist he knew would listen. His voice was steady as the line connected. "I have something you need to hear," he said. "And I'm ready to tell it all. If this story gripped you to the very end, please like and subscribe for more powerful, heart-pounding stories."